What are the effects and responses of earthquakes in developing countries? The earthquake in Haiti in 2010 was on a much larger scale, and the country was not prepared. Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world. With a population of 10 million, 72% live on less than $2 a day. The average life expectancy is 62 years and is currently ranked 145th out of 169 countries in the UN Human Development Index, which is the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. 86% of the people live in Port-au-Prince. They live in slum conditions, mostly tightly packed, poorly built, concrete buildings. 80% of education in Haiti is provided in often poor quality private schools. The state system generally provided better education, but provided far too few places. Half of the people in Port-au-Prince have no access to latrines, and only 1/3 have access to tap water. So what were the effects? The 7.0 magnitude earthquake hit Haiti on the 12th of January 2010 at 16:53 local time. The official death toll was 222,500, and thousands more were unaccounted for, buried beneath collapsed structures. Of the 2.5 million people living in Port-au-Prince and surrounding areas, 15% either died or were injured, with 75,000 buried in mass graves immediately to prevent the spread of disease. Even so, many bodies were piled up in the streets and left for days. Léogâne, at the epicenter, had 80 to 90% of its buildings destroyed, and in Port-au-Prince, many civic offices were destroyed, such as schools, 80%, hospitals, tax offices, and the parliament itself. The United Nations lost its headquarters along with 80 to 100 staff. Collapsed buildings were the main reason for death and injury. It was soon discovered that constructors had used brittle steel, weak cement mixed with dirty or salty sand, and often steel reinforcement rods had been terminated at the joints between columns and the floors of buildings, where the earthquake stresses are the highest. 1.5 million people were made homeless, forcing 800,000 people to live outdoors in 450 improvised camps in Port-au-Prince. Of this number, 40% of them had to make makeshift shelter material, and only 3 camps had potable water. Port-au-Prince's main port was destroyed, and in terms of services, phone lines failed soon after the earthquake, adding to the chaos as communications were impossible. So what was the response? Within the first month, much of the initial efforts involved manually lifting of rubble, as no technical lifting gear was available. Aid agency staff already in the area understandably looked for their own families, and so were not part of any coordinated response team. International search teams from around the world brought together their equipment and expertise. 120 people were rescued from under rubble in the 2 weeks after the earthquake. Injured survivors made their way to hospitals in the Dominican Republic, but were soon overwhelmed by the services there. Within Port-au-Prince, doctors were performing many amputations with only basic medical equipment. Due to the proximity to the United States, there was a strong sense of responsibility to help Haiti. President Obama sent 5,500 troops and 6 military ships. Celebrities took part in a 2-hour Hope for Haiti telethon and raised £35 million. The UN launched an appeal for £562 million and to help 3 million people for 6 months. The World Food Programme appealed to donors for 14 million ration packs that could be eaten without cooking, enough to feed 2 million people for a month. 1 year on, only an estimated 5% of the rubble was cleared, and landmark buildings important for community morale remained in disrepair. Unemployment was rife, and camps appeared permanent, giving shelter to 800,000 people, with no hope of imminent resettlement due to the logistical bottlenecks and enduring problems associated with land rights. In the first year, only 1,100 new permanent houses were built nationwide, mostly outside Port-au-Prince. Different aid groups worked independently, so various designs of housing were used rather than a single plan for the whole city. Because progress was slow, some locals started to rebuild homes themselves in old ways, on soft ground or steep hillsides, using poor materials. 2 years on, overall, $5.5 billion was pledged by other countries and international agencies, but only half of this had been released to projects. About 40% of the rubble had been removed. Over 7,000 Haitians had been trained in practical construction skills, and transitional housing is slowly becoming available for people still living in camps. Numbers have reduced by 66% since July 2010. More than 500,000 people are still living in camps, with the majority in emergency shelters only designed to last for up to 12 months. In summary, many countries responded to appeals for aid, pledging funds and dispatching rescue and medical teams, engineers, support personnel. Communication, air, land and sea transport facilities, hospitals and electrical networks had been damaged by the earthquake, which slowed rescue and aid efforts. There was much confusion over who was in charge. Air traffic congestion and problems with prioritization of flights further complicated early relief work. Port-au-Prince's morgues were quickly overwhelmed, with many tens of thousands of bodies having to be buried in mass graves. Delays in aid distribution led to angry appeals from aid workers and survivors, and looting and sporadic violence were observed. Haiti continues to struggle in its attempt to recover from this earthquake today.